Um, yes. So I'm quite pleased to be here, and thanks. I have to thank the organizers for inviting me, and I've benefited a lot from the discussions earlier in the day, during the day, and I have developed some of my research ideas in the past month, and I'd like to take this occasion to share them with you, and hopefully get some comments and suggestions on the topic of environmental movement and climate change, evidence and impact in China. Now we all know that China has become the biggest emitter of emission producer. And one of the facts maybe you haven't paid much attention is a report from German Watch, independent organization that has produced a climate policy performance review, and that shows that China actually has been a quite strong actor in promoting national emission reduction policy, and that such policies have rapidly been intensifying across the country. And China has also been found quite successful in installation of renewable technologies within the country. Now, academic scholarly discussion on China's efforts in climate change has shown that so one school has used the authoritarian regime argument, strengthening that the undemocratic nature of the regime contributes its effectiveness in environmental policy implementation and performances. Well, today I'm going to examine the non-state actors and see under the ideas. Some of the composition of my presentation will be made up of, firstly, I'll evaluate non-state actors' involvement and contribution to climate policies, and then I will have a look at EU's interaction with non-state actors and environmental movement in China. And the main argument of mine is that there is a mismatch and gap between EU's promoting of China's more contribution in climate policies through promoting civil society in China. There are certain gaps. Okay, so let's come back firstly to look at environmental NGOs in China. Work on non-state actors' involvement in environmental protection is little that examines the China case, and even less work has been done on the topic of climate change. So probably my work it can be seen as a broad brush that look upon this topic, but and I'm certain that the later part of the evaluation of EU's work is a bit more, even more broader. But that will give you some sense in how to look at this issue with certain framework. And my past work has environmental activism in China has made me to believe that the Chinese government, although keeping very restrictive conditions for NGO development, has provided movement opportunities for environmental NGOs and social movement, particularly in policies that are that lack of effective implementation. So openings within the political opportunity structure exists, particularly, and climate policy can be seen as one of such weakly performed areas. In terms of the development of NGOs, people may wonder if there are such actors that exist in China. And one question that have often been asked is that it must be quite dangerous for you to approach these NGOs. But my fieldwork has shown that actually the sector of NGO has developed very rapidly. And to give you a general overview of this NGO sector, there are currently 450,000 registered NGOs across the country, and unregistered and illegal NGOs that work underground or registered as business organizations or use internet account may probably of the same amount as the registered ones. And environmental NGOs are the most active and the strongest among them. But don't forget, still, although environmental NGOs were among the very first to establish, they have only no more than 20 years of history. So they are very young, and climate NGOs that focus on climate change are even more represent even a new force within this sector. And categorization is very important. I want to distinguish them into several groups. So you have international NGOs, for instance, Greenpeace, WWF China, that have worked in China for years. For instance, Greenpeace have been in China since 1994, but more independently, they got registered only several years ago. One thing to keep in mind is that international NGOs, although they are branches of national, transnational environmental NGOs, they work in China in a different fashion than those that's found in the rest of the world. And you have domestic NGOs and grassroots ones that are rather small and weak in terms of organizational development. In terms of environmental NGOs, they represent a field that sees more and more financial support, originally coming from international background, the US, EU, or Hong Kong. But over the years, there are more domestic finance that's available for them. So membership fee has accounted more than before, which will account for more than 40% of their total financial resources. So that means these NGOs are getting more and more independence, and they see less control of the government. And in terms of their issue of focuses, older environmental NGOs focus on environmental education, development, and sustainability. And climate change is only one new issue that they gradually takes on board, along with China's commitment to climate policies globally. So environmental NGOs in China, I see them as adopting rather they don't counter government, that's for sure, you could say, but I see them as having developed their own identity to promote social justice and the sustainable development of different social groups, particularly those marginalized groups. And in terms of climate activism, they are finding their standpoint. So they apparently haven't adopted radical environmental justice as climate movement has shown in the world. They have developed the Chinese feeder on this topic, on this issue. Here I just want to show how closely their principles and ideals in climate change can be seen in comparison with government's principles. It's a little small, but sorry to allow me to play with this. It's a new software, and the position of Chinese civil society, they strongly advocate for different responsibilities that developing countries bear in comparison to developed countries. And the red lines are the similar principles that can compare to what government advocates. The green lines underlying is what NGOs especially want to advocate of their own. So they want to encourage, they have civic ideals, which is to promote public participation in policy making, and social equity and environmental justice in terms of climate policies. So these are the major standpoint in their taking of environmental climate activities, climate-focused activities. And one of the main areas that they work on climate change is climate diplomacy. Now, climate diplomacy for China is huge. So one of the delegators from China says actually China's foreign policy nowadays is climate policy. So that's one area that they have shown more and more welcoming attitude toward environmental NGOs in China. So, and the Chinese NGOs have stepped up into this area only after 2007. So that's really, they are quite new, and they are just learning in process in terms of capacity building. They don't have much professional knowledge in the area, and they don't know how international negotiations take place. They're finding route or ways. They're finding their feet actually, but gradually they have shown that in Doha conference, which mandate recently, they were able to organize or chairing some of the sessions, interacting with international NGOs. And as I said, they begin to show that they have their own independent standpoint. Although they are quite influenced by international NGOs, that there are dialogues or workshops or trainings from European NGOs or government, but they are resisting from totally following suit, particularly, for instance, on China following the target of 2-degree change. And so they are trying to find their own voice and refusing to just follow suit. In terms of their interaction with different areas, NGOs from different regions, it seems that with their development and expansion of activities, they have interacted with NGOs from southern countries, particularly in South Asia. And they are taking a leading role in these activities. But with northern NGOs, they seem to work well with US NGOs. They were saying that they could find common interests in practical activities, practical issues with US when they try to discuss certain issues, and they have successfully, actually through informal discussion with one American NGO to promote a common agreement between China and the US, so which is quite a successful move. But unfortunately, with European NGOs, things haven't developed that well. There are cultural differences, and they find that they are talking about different issues. The Chinese NGOs worry more about how to manage their fundings, something that European NGOs were not that interested in, were not. So the relationship differs. And with Chinese government on climate issues, they have gained, surprisingly in comparison to other environmental policies, more formal channels to, in terms of policy discussion. They have been invited to certain policy consultations on the Chinese government's drafting of climate laws and certain policies. So I would say that in this regard, the Chinese NGOs have more and more autonomy to play an influential role. And this follows, there are some more examples of how Chinese NGOs work in terms of on climate issues. So there are the network of, which is called China's civil, a network on climate change, and there is another network that coordinates students and young people. So such networking activities and coordinations among NGOs are not that common on other social or political issues. So that's why I wanted to argue that they have gained more and more political opportunities on the issue of climate change. And international coordination has been increased as well. I'll find the example a bit later on. The next one. So one of the another area that they focus on is to work with private corporations, restructuring the economy and to promote low carbon economy or clean market is one of China's main climate policies. And the NGOs have seen to be implementing many of the major policy goals in this area. Let's look at this part first. So private entrepreneurs are gaining more and more economic power, and they are playing a strong role in China's fighting or combating climate change. What I have seen through my research is that private entrepreneurs or management in private corporations have become more and more concerned of the environment. So about this, there are surveys indicating, sorry, it's in Chinese, indicating that they are very ready through the framework of corporate social CSR, so corporate social responsibility, that they want to commit to climate change and they want to contribute to China's total economy. That's one of the main motivations, but at the same time, many of the private entrepreneurs see green economy as an area to gain more profits. So I want to argue that they have developed certain ecological citizenship, that they have been their values that are supported by Chinese heritage. Okay. And so that environmental NGOs work with them in terms of monitoring and supervision, monitoring their engagement in clean technologies and reducing emission emission of CO2s. And in terms of promoting green markets, they have certain gongos. That's another type I forgot to mention. Is more government-organized NGOs who also specialize on climate change or on energy issues. So they are important in attracting domestic and international capital and investment. And private entrepreneurs or enterprises have been quite active in social innovation and in setting up NGOs or foundations of their own. So they have been organizing certain NGOs and be more engaged into developing renewable market. And so NGOs could represent some certain interests of theirs. In terms of customer or individual citizens, that's another area that NGOs have tried hard to work on. So the Chinese actually, the public thinks that climate change is a scientific issue. They don't know what climate change is about, and they think it's a diplomatic issue of the government. So they think that the most responsible for climate change issue is government, and that's the bigger part on the left chart. And on this chart, who do they think are the most important in solving or responding to climate change? Still, government plays the largest role, and private companies or NGOs. That this part is NGOs, and that's individuals, and this part, the white part, is corporations. So the public has difficulties in really understanding what they could do to contribute to reducing their CO2 emissions, for instance. And the NGOs have been eager to successfully in educating the public, and in terms of mitigation or adapting to climate change, they have also shown that they have that's are the areas that they work in most. So you have in domestic sector that they try to promote energy saving efforts. So they were trying to promote using air conditioning by setting it to 26 degrees. So I still need more data and evidences to support how much they have contributed in this regard, but that's one of the key areas of theirs. So to evaluate the Chinese NGOs' role, I think that they have done, in terms of, let's look at the chart most. In terms of international cooperation, that's a growing area of interest to them, and they are seeing more and more influence. And it's more supported and encouraged by the Chinese government. However, in this regard, the EU's involvement is little. Well, the EU's involvement haven't been quite successful. In terms of mitigating energy saving, in terms of mitigation, what the Chinese have seen, I think that's something relatively new. That's the new initiative that environmental NGOs have adopted in their adjusting themselves into climate change areas. So in comparison, the adaptation of climate change is based on their original strengths on environmental protection. So that's where they work the most, like the protecting, like the water issue or ecosystem protection. So that's where their strengths are, and mitigation of climate change is something rather new, but there are evidence that shows that collaborations have been seen in terms of the adoption or promoting of clean technologies. But these are both of the areas that they have been facilitating government in terms of policy implementation. But in this regard, in terms of mitigation by promoting renewable technologies or market, the EU has been more focused on state level of cooperation with Chinese NGOs, with Chinese government. So they take it more as a political issue that stays at state level, makes things rather static. In terms of adaptation, so I quite agree with earlier discussions that were mentioned in this morning and early in the afternoon, that the efforts have been rather weak from the EU. With the withdrawal of overseas development aid from many European governments, from the UK for instance, the EU's involvement becomes even less, and more attention is focused still on state level. You have REAP programs like that, but that's more on a global collaboration. So in terms of adaptation, that's something more based on China's original, China's own environmental issues. But climate change has provided an opportunity for Chinese government to recognize, to learn how to deal with them in terms of tackling or managing the uncertainty and complexity of such issues. So I think that's where civil society's involvement will be best based in. And in terms of future, to predict Chinese environmental NGOs work in terms of international cooperation, I would rather say that probably they will advocate more for the interests of developing countries and arguing for more of financial assistance and technological dissemination. And in this, with such a strategy, they will facilitate Chinese governments in their own climate negotiation, and probably that will promote China's stronger role in terms of climate politics in the global scale. Thank you.